the door of the pharmacy opened with a soft chime. Sarah, a black woman in her 30 years old, stepped inside, carrying her sick daughter Emma in her arms. Emma, a pale and frail-looking child, coughed weakly as Sarah gently hushed her. Sarah's face showed concern as she approached the counter, holding a prescription. The pharmacy owner, Mr. Carlson, looked up from his desk. His eyes narrowed as he noticed the striking difference in skin color between Sarah and the child. He frowned, suspicion growing in his mind. A black woman with a white child? This doesn't add up, he thought to himself. Sarah smiled politely and handed over the prescription, explaining that her daughter needed the medicine urgently. Mr. Carlson barely acknowledged her words. Instead, he glanced at the child again and reached for the phone. Without saying anything to Sarah, he quietly called the police, reporting what he believed to be a kidnapping. The tension in the air grew thicker, but Sarah remained unaware of the storm brewing behind the counter. The sound of police sirens filled the street. Moments later, 2 officers entered the pharmacy, their expressions serious. Sarah turned around, confused by the sudden commotion. "Is there a problem?" she asked politely. The officers walked up to her, their tone firm. "Ma'am, we received a report that this child may have been kidnapped. Can you explain?" Sarah's eyes widened in shock. "Kidnapped? This is my daughter," she said, holding Emma closer. Mr. Carlson stepped forward, pointing at them. "Look at her and the child. There's no way they're related. She must have taken the girl," he insisted. Sarah was stunned. "I have proof," she said, pulling out her phone. She showed pictures of Emma from the day she was born to now. She even displayed Emma's birth certificate and her medical records. But Mr. Carlson waved it off, saying, "Anyone can fake documents and pictures these days." A crowd began to gather, whispering among themselves. Some people defended Sarah, saying she looked like a caring mother. Others sided with Mr. Carlson, nodding in agreement. The officers didn't seem convinced either. One of them asked Sarah to step aside for more questioning. Holding back tears, Sarah stood firm. "This is my child, and I won't leave until you listen to me," she said, her voice shaking but determined. Sarah, feeling cornered but determined, asked to make a phone call. "Please, let me call my father," she said calmly but firmly. The officers hesitated at first, but one of them handed her a phone. Sarah dialed quickly. Her voice shook as she spoke, but her words carried confidence. "Dad, I need you to come to the pharmacy right away. There's a misunderstanding and I need your help." While they waited, the tension in the pharmacy grew. Mr. Carlson scoffed. "What's she going to do? Call her lawyer or something?" he muttered under his breath. The crowd began to murmur, some questioning why the police were so quick to act, while others still sided with Mr. Carlson. Sarah stood her ground, holding Emma close and stroking her hair to keep her calm. Within minutes, the door swung open. A tall, commanding man in a sharp suit walked in. His presence silenced the room. It was Judge Anderson, Sarah's father. An officer recognized him immediately and stiffened. "Judge Anderson," he said, clearly surprised. Mr. Carlson's face went pale. Judge Anderson scanned the room, his sharp eyes taking in the scene. He walked straight to Sarah, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "What is going on here?" he asked, his voice calm but authoritative. One of the officers began explaining, stumbling over his words as he described the accusation. Mr. Carlson interrupted, saying, "I called because this woman doesn't match the child. It's suspicious." Judge Anderson turned to Mr. Carlson, his expression unreadable. "So, you assumed she kidnapped her own child because of their skin color?" he asked, his voice low but firm. Mr. Carlson stammered, trying to justify his actions. "I was just looking out for the child," he said weakly. Judge Anderson's calm demeanor didn't waver. "Looking out for her, or judging her? Did you ask any questions before jumping to conclusions? Did you think about the trauma you caused my daughter and granddaughter?" His words were like a hammer, striking the silence in the room. The officers and Mr. Carlson stood frozen, unable to respond. Judge Anderson turned to the officers and Mr. Carlson, his tone calm but filled with authority. "Do you understand what you just did?" he asked. "You assumed my daughter wasn't Emma's mother just because they don't look alike. You didn't stop to think about the pain you caused her. Instead, you acted on prejudice." Mr. Carlson tried to defend himself. "I was only trying to protect the child. It looked suspicious," he said, his voice shaking. Judge Anderson shook his head. "Suspicious to you because you couldn't see beyond skin color. You didn't ask questions. You didn't try to understand. Instead, you accused a mother of kidnapping her own child." He turned to the crowd, speaking louder so everyone could hear. "This is the problem with assumptions. They lead to harm, humiliation, and distrust. What if my granddaughter's condition worsened because of this delay? What if this had escalated further? All because of bias and a lack of compassion." The officers lowered their heads, realizing their mistake. "We're sorry, sir," one of them said. Judge Anderson nodded but added, "Apologies are not enough. Learn from this. Don't let your bias cloud your judgment again. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect." The room grew silent as his words sank in. Some customers nodded in agreement while others looked away, ashamed of their earlier judgment. Judge Anderson turned back to Mr. Carlson. "I suggest you reflect on your actions today," he said. "Your job is to help people, not to make their lives harder." Mr. Carlson stammered, "I didn't mean any harm." But Judge Anderson's expression didn't soften. "Intentions don't erase consequences," he said firmly. "Think before you act next time." Sarah stood silently, holding Emma close. She felt a mix of relief and pride as her father stood up for her and delivered such an important lesson. The room remained quiet as Judge Anderson finished speaking, leaving everyone with something to think about. The officers apologized again, this time directly to Sarah. "We're sorry for the misunderstanding, ma'am," one of them said. "We should have handled this better." Sarah nodded, but didn't say much. She was still processing everything. Her focus remained on Emma, who had fallen asleep in her arms. Judge Anderson turned to Sarah and spoke gently. "Are you okay?" he asked. She nodded and smiled faintly. "I just want to get Emma her medicine and take her home," she said softly. Judge Anderson gave her a reassuring pat on the shoulder. Mr. Carlson hesitated for a moment, then finally spoke. "I'm sorry," he mumbled, avoiding Sarah's eyes. "I shouldn't have assumed." His words trailed off. Sarah looked at him, her expression calm but firm. "Next time, think before you act," she said. "Not everyone has someone like my father to stand up for them." Judge Anderson helped Sarah pay for the medicine and carried the bag for her. As they walked out of the pharmacy, the crowd parted, some murmuring apologies, others still silent with guilt. Sarah held her head high, her father by her side, as they stepped into the fresh air. Outside, Judge Anderson looked at his daughter. "I'm proud of you for staying calm," he said. Sarah smiled. "I've learned from the best," she replied. They both laughed softly, a moment of lightness after the heavy ordeal. As they drove away, Sarah looked down at Emma, who was resting peacefully. "We're okay now," she whispered, kissing her daughter's forehead. The scene ended with a reflective note. highlighting the importance of standing up against prejudice and teaching others to look beyond appearances. We hope you enjoyed this story and learned a lesson. For more related stories, please subscribe our channel, and don't forget to like, share, and comment wherefrom you watch. Thanks for watching.